So I'm going to call the meeting to order. And let's see, has everybody had an opportunity to read through the minutes? Yes. Are there any corrections, discussion? Can I get a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay.
I'm abstaining since I wasn't here last time. And I
Well-
don't really know what happened.
You know, I think that happens periodically, but I think you can go ahead and squeak through an aye unless you just want to, do you want to abstain? You can abstain. Okay,
Yeah.
we've got one
Yeah,
abstention.
you got the votes.
Okay, you remind me to call for abstentions. Okay. We have a public comment period. Is there anybody from the public that would like to discuss anything that is not on the agenda, correct? Is that correct?
Right.
You're our only public member, so you're just here to watch, okay? Okay. Next, we have the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, CAPER, and update on Iowa City projects and program. One of the staff going to lead us through it. We're going to review this, and do you require any action on this?
Yeah.
To approve it?
Yep.
For submission to the council?
This one goes directly to HUD.
Okay.
Last year we did a memo. This year we did a few slides to put together to talk about the report. I know we have kind of a new group, so if you have questions as we go along, feel free to interrupt me, or we can take questions at the end too. So the CAPER is our end of year report. This is the document that tells HUD what we've done in our last fiscal year. This reports on our community development block grant funds and our home investment partnership program funds. It's an assessment of the progress we've made on our consolidated plan goals. So once you've been through a few cycles, things will start to make more sense. Basically, our annual action plan says, what are we going to do in the year? And then the CAPER says, what did we accomplish in the last year? And this is due to HUD within 90 days of the end of our fiscal year. So this is due each year at the end of September. Some things to know: the main focus of this plan is our federally funded activities. So HUD wants to know the impact of the federal dollars. We do get to talk about our local programs and other local projects going on in some of the narrative fields, but the main thing they want to know is how are we using those federal funds and what have we accomplished with those. We send this report to HUD through a database called IDIS. So there are some fields that are required that we don't have the flexibility to edit. To try to make it more user-friendly, we've labeled those tables in the CAPER report. The ones that are HUD required are called IDIS tables. The ones that we've created on our own are called city tables, and we've made those to try to make it a little more user-friendly. Some of the highlights in the last year: the city met our CDBG timeliness goal in May. We talk about this a lot with the commission because we're always worried about projects meeting their spending deadlines so we can reach our timeliness goals with HUD. So we were able to do that, which was good. We were able to complete 2 neighborhood improvement projects. Those experienced delays due to COVID and the pandemic, and also derecho, I think, was a factor there. So we were glad to wrap those up. Those 2 activities were associated with our previous consolidated plan, so over time we're chipping away at those last few projects and closing those out. We completed 21 CDBG CV activities. Those were, CDBG CV was additional one-time funding from HUD to prepare, prevent, and respond to coronavirus. We did some additional public outreach opportunities. City staff went out to places like the food pantries, and we received feedback on, it was a sticker survey, and we asked people what the most important housing needs were to them. So we collected some information and got to interact with the public a bit there. And we know from the data that the projects and the activities that are being undertaken are reaching beneficiaries that are non-white, people who are below 30% AMI, and people with Hispanic or Latino ethnicity, so that's great. And we also, if you remember, FY22 through the mid-year round, we funded the Green State Partnership Program, which was a homeownership down payment assistance program, so the first home was sold through that in FY22.
Has there been just one down payment so far? Or
Yep.
two? One?
One so far, well,
What?
in FY22.
Yeah, we had a second one recently, so the second one will be reported in the next caper.
Okay.
But 2 total.
Some of the challenges in FY22, a lot of these carried over from the previous fiscal year, things from the pandemic. We've received a lot of new funding sources. We just talked about Home ARP as the commission, so that's been, I think that was $1.8 million of additional funding that we didn't have previously, so planning for some of those things. Rising cost of housing, that makes it a challenge for nonprofit agencies to acquire housing for rental activities. Lack of bids for construction and rehab projects, that's been a big one. I think you've heard some of that from agencies that have come in and reported supply chain volatility that has made delays on projects a little difficult. Strain on local agencies, people are taking on more projects, which we appreciate, but it also strains their staff and their capacity. We're seeing a lot larger funding requests, which sometimes adds to the complexity like we've talked about with the 501 project or some of the things that we'll have to plan for the DVIP project that was just funded for FY23. Rising mortgage rates, outcomes related to the current City Steps plan are delayed as we catch up on that backlog I mentioned, like the 2 parks projects that we've finished up recently. CDBG and home spending, I did print these tables out because I know they're not very legible on this slide. So for FY22, we spent a little over $700,000 of CDBG. For our home investment partnership program funds, we spent just under $200,000. And then for our CDBG CV, the COVID-related funds, we spent about $67,000. And that does not include the additional funds that we received from the state. Those are the CV funds directly from HUD. Impact from federally funded projects. I guess this slide shows you the impact of all of the programs and projects undertaken by our partners. The vast majority of these are completed by some of our subrecipients, people that you've seen present or ask for funds. Over 5,000 people assisted through the completion of our neighborhood improvement projects. Those are undertaken by our Parks and Recreation staff typically. Over 3,000 people were assisted through CDBG public services activities. That's that small portion of our aid to agencies funding that we can fund with the CDBG dollars. So 67% of those beneficiaries were people experiencing homelessness. An additional 1,500 people assisted through CDBG CV. That was a project developed by Shelter House to support coordinated entry. The city had 17 homeowner rehab projects completed. The Housing Fellowship completed a rental rehab project, and they were able to assist 4 households through that. Erica mentioned the first home sold through the Green State program, and that had, I think, good reviews, right? People were pretty happy about that. 20 small businesses were assisted through the CDBG CV program that was undertaken by ECOG to combat financial impact of COVID-19. 81% of the total businesses assisted through the program were women or people of color. About 76% of beneficiaries served through the federal funding in FY22 were below 30% AMI. Some things on the horizon, the 501 project is up and running now, so that will be in our FY23 caper. The HVAC improvement project, Shelter House came and presented to HCDC about that recently, so that should be on track to be completed this year after some delays. And then we'll have some bigger projects that were just funded through FY23, like the shelter construction. The home ARP activities are on the horizon, and then we'll also see the conclusion of the CDBG CV grants, so those are winding down.
So our city administered projects, our South District program, we've acquired 6 properties or 3 duplexes to rehab and sell as owner occupied or for home ownership. We put at least $35,000 in city rehab funds, and we do up to $25,000 in down payment assistance for the purchase. We've sold 4 of those, and we have 2 available right now. If you know anyone interested, they should apply to the city. The price range is about $150,000 without those subsidies. So our Green State partnership, we mentioned we have 2 sold, so that's ongoing. We're getting referrals from Green State, and then we qualify them and we make sure they're eligible for the program. Our neighborhood improvement program, we have currently, so this is a $75,000 annual set aside, and we partner with our Parks Department typically to expend those funds. Right now, we're doing accessibility projects, so like curb ramp improvements so that members of our community can access the parks. The current project is at Weatherby. CDBG and home rehab, we do an owner-occupied rehab program that our staff administers. We do things like emergency repairs, exterior repair, accessibility. We can do projects in mobile homes. And as Brianna mentioned, we did 17 of those projects last year, and that's just an ongoing program that we offer every year. We have funding for that every year. And then our economic development, we are no longer doing small business loans right now through our department because of staff capacity, but we are doing grants for technical assistance for small businesses. So what that looks like, we have an agreement with 4Cs, and they're assisting childcare, in-home childcare providers, helping them start their businesses. So we give them a grant to assist those small businesses. And so, yeah, that's our kind of our city administered programs.
Excuse me, what type of property does the city still have for sale?
Property for sale?
Well,
Yeah, the South District ones?
yes.
Yeah, they're duplexes that have been rehabbed, so we convert them to condos and sell them.
Okay, so each side
Yes.
is the price that you were talking about?
Yes, and that's, so the 150,000, I think one's 147 and one's maybe 155 right now. That includes the 35,000 that the city put in for rehab that's forgiven, so you don't have to, that's not, if you live there for 10 years, you wouldn't have to repay that. And then applicants, based on our underwriting, would be eligible up to 25,000 in home down payment assistance. So your loan is gonna be, this amount minus 60,000 potentially, so it's pretty affordable.
Okay, thank you.
Is there more?
I think just a couple.
Okay, I just have a couple questions that I can ask at the end.
I don't have to read you all these numbers, but this slide just shows the local impact of some of the other things that we funded outside of our CDBG and home funds. We've talked about aid to agencies. A small portion of that is CDBG, but the city does invest quite a bit of money in the aid to agencies program. We also invest money in the GRIP, General Rehabilitation and Improvement Program. They were able to assist 5 homeowners in FY22. The city partners with community for a security deposit program. In FY22, they were able to assist 212 households. There's some additional funding that goes towards projects. Center for Worker Justice, they did a project in FY22 to help provide bilingual language assistance so people could fill out applications for housing assistance and those kind of things. Weatherization of Forest View mobile homes. Healthy Homes is a program to provide improvements in indoor air quality, and they were able to assist 4 households in the last fiscal year. And then Iowa City invests $500,000 in the Affordable Housing Fund, which is administered by the Housing Trust Fund of Johnson County. Is there anything you want to add about those local programs?
I don't think so.
Well, that was one of the comments I had, that I like seeing all the, what I'm going to call partnerships with nonprofits, that I think especially when city staff can't, take on more projects themselves, it's great to see the city invest in the nonprofits to do that work for them. So that was good. I liked reading all of those.
That kind of goes into this slide too. A huge portion of all of our CDBG CV projects were undertaken by nonprofits. So on this slide, this shows you the portion of funds we received from the Iowa Economic Development Authority. They were CDBG CV funds, but we received it from the state rather than HUD. So the organizations listed on here, 4Cs, Community, Dream City, DVIP, Iowa Legal Aid, Shelter House, Table to Table, and United Action for Youth. Those were the agencies that made the accomplishments on the slide possible. Shelter House also administered a housing assistance program with the CV money. So next steps in this process, we're asking for HCDC's approval to submit the plan to HUD. If there's changes or things you want to make, we can certainly do that, or if you have comments to make. We submit the plan to HUD. HUD has 45 days to review. They would approve the plan, and then we we'll be starting soon again already the process for FY24. So we'll be asking for our applications for that towards the end of December. So that's about it.
I had a couple things. I had a question about the down payment program with Green State. Do the higher interest rates making it more difficult? Or will it make it more difficult to meet that goal of I can't remember how many houses down payment we were going to fund?
So I think we were going to do 7 or 8. I haven't heard that being a barrier yet. We talked to our partner lenders quite a bit, and so if something comes up, we could probably revise our program parameters a little bit, but so far I don't think that has been a barrier.
Okay, and it was on page 31. It's a little thing. It's more of a spelling thing, but I think in the third paragraph, you're towards the second to last sentence. You're talking about community crisis centers, mobile crisis outreach program, and community is spelled wrong in that. It needs capital U. But I also had a question about that. I know that the city gave them more than $178,000. Or are you just reporting on CDBG related money? Because I know that they got a higher investment in the mobile crisis program than 178.
Through the ARPA money, you mean?
Well, I'm not sure. See, sometimes there's pots that are kind of combined. So that's my question is, does the 178 does it account for part of the funding that went into that program, or?
I think this excludes the ARPA money, so the 178, I believe, is from the Affordable Housing Fund.
Okay.
So that's what that would incorporate, and I think maybe the ARPA money would be on the next CAPER if we include that.
Yeah, it could be looking back at the funds that were spent versus the funds that have been allocated.
Okay. And the only other question I had was just more of a general one. I noticed that there were targets for number of services provided in some grants to agencies, and not all agencies met those numbers. Does that matter to us or not?
It depends. There was one project, Neighborhood Centers of Johnson County. I tried to put a footnote under the table, but like they have 2 activities that they're completing. In FY22, they completed the Broadway portion of the activities, so we reported those beneficiaries. And then in FY23, the Pheasant Ridge project will be done, and that will contribute to their total beneficiaries.
I think this was more in the aid to agencies rather than the public facilities. And I think the one that I noted was 4Cs missed the mark by quite a bit in terms of the services provided. And I just wondered if that's a problem or not.
Do you think that was for economic development?
I feel like they exceeded their accomplishments, so I'm trying to figure out where that would be.
I didn't turn it over because it was just more of a general question. And
I was curious about that too.
yeah, because I'm certainly not, being critical or anything. It's more informational on my part because I do understand how that happens. Lots of factors can affect the numbers served.
Where is that in here?
I didn't mark it,
Okay.
Carol, because I wasn't going to actually, I didn't really mean to call out
Okay.
anybody, and that's not my
Oh, okay.
point
Well, no,
either.
it's a good question for
Yeah.
information.
I actually do have an answer for that now that I know what is going
Okay.
on. So part of that CV project was back to school tutoring and assistance for kids at home during the pandemic. It was virtual learning support. And I don't know if you remember at one point, this project spanned, I think, more than one fiscal year, but at one point they were planning for kids to be at home long term. And then there was an order from the governor at one point that said, everyone go back to school kind of thing. So things that they couldn't plan for on the front end, they, I think, anticipated for people to be at home a lot longer than they were.
Okay, that's perfect. Okay.
This is just a tiny itty-bitty nitpicky thing, but since we're doing typos, on page 1, the second line from the bottom, the word "in" appears twice in a row.
Each one. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
They wanted you to know it's really in Iowa City. Really. Not a typo. Not like on the edge, like in.
It's a long report.
I had just a clarification question. On page 4, that chart that has the expected strategic plan, actual strategic plan, expected program year, actual program year, can you just explain to me what those mean?
Just explain it, is that what you said? Yeah, sure. This table is really confusing. I wish I could make it easier to read. So basically, when we do our consolidated plan, which is a 5-year plan, we have to set goals for the next 5 years, and every year we're tracking the incremental progress that we've made towards that. So this table has goals for the 5-year plan, and then it is also having us report on the goals that we set for our annual action plan. The caveat with that is that a lot of the activities that we fund for the fiscal year aren't completed within the fiscal year. Like home projects aren't going to be typically completed in that time frame. They may take 2 years. So
That makes sense.
and we're also, what's not shown in this, we're still completing projects that are contributing to the previous consolidated plan, which don't show up in this table. So that part makes it a little bit confusing too.
Okay. And then I just had a question about page, let's see. I think it was page 22, the minority business enterprises and women business enterprises. I was just curious what was going on there because I just noticed there were no contracts to minority business enterprises or women business enterprise. I didn't know if it was just like a lack of people or what.
It is. That's a good question. So HUD has us track the amount of, basically when people are doing public facility projects or housing projects, when they're hiring contractors, they want us to track those things to see if we're marketing effectively to minority-owned businesses or women-owned businesses. So we'll give people there's a database for the state where you can search registered contractors for whatever project you're undertaking, but it truly is just a shortage of people who are owning construction companies or female-owned operations. We do have, when we put projects out to bid, we typically ask that they will send the bid packet to at least one contractor that meets those requirements, but sometimes there's just not people available, so.
Yeah. Okay.
The city is, I guess on that note, would you talk a little bit about the women construction project? The women.
Sure. So one of our South District program that I mentioned previously, as we're doing rehab and as we did rehab in one of the properties, we partnered with, I believe it was with Kirkwood, and we did like a women's confidence in construction course. And so some of the work was done by this group of women learning the construction trade. So I believe they did like the cabinets in the kitchen and learned like floor tiling and that kind of thing. And we also partner with a program through the high schools where students have a construction course, and they built a deck on one of our properties. So we're partnering with different groups to learn the trades as we rehab these properties.
That's really great.
Yeah, that's cool.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Yes, I do have question on the page 5 on the economic development. Can you just explain it more? Because I know a lot of small business is struggling. And you mentioned that this is a grant for small businesses.
Do you want to know more about the projects that were completed or why there's not more accomplishments?
No, just I need to know more about the program.
Okay. Would you want to take that one?
So we previously had a small business loan program that we've done, like since I've been with the city, just a handful of, they're called micro enterprise loans. So they're, the owners are low income, and it's like one or more staff, or I think it's less than 5 staff to be considered a micro enterprise. And we recently discontinued that just because we don't have staff to work through those programs, and something we could pick up in the future as we kind of catch up after all these pandemic grants that we're working on. The one that we have going on right now is technical assistance for small businesses. So a nonprofit like 4Cs who is helping for-profit small businesses and micro enterprises, they could get this grant for technical assistance. And so 4Cs is assisting in-home childcare providers and helping them get set up with like the DHS requirements so they can provide that service.
Okay, so the help for the small business for now is not available.
Yeah, we don't have our small business loans currently. I think there may be some opportunities with the ARPA money outside of this community development program for small businesses. And we also did one of our allocations of CDBG CV funds went specifically to businesses. And I think that was like 400,000, about that amount.
Yeah.
But that was in 2020. So.
Oh.
Anybody else? Kyle?
No, I think I just was counting wrong. You mentioned in the PowerPoint that there were 20 small businesses assisted, but it looked like there were like 27 on Table E, City Table E. And some of the names don't match up with the, I don't know what this one is. It's like the PR 26, the financial summary report. I was just trying, I'm just trusting that you guys have all the numbers right. I was just trying to tie stuff together, and it was hard to figure out
No, it's a good question.
numbers and numbers, because like there's some that I see on each list, but others that I don't. But then it's also some of them I'm sure have LLCs that are under different names. But I just recounted, and I got 27 and 27. I just saw the PowerPoint and mentioned 20. So I didn't know if
There
we were
was
just rounded
27,
down.
there's 27 total businesses in the program. The program spanned multiple fiscal years. So what we're reporting in this is the activities that were completed in FY22. But you're right that there's 27 total. So the previous activities would have been reported in last year's CAPER. We put it all in one table just to show all 27 businesses, but you're
And is that, I mean, most of these look like they were all related to COVID assistance type issues. At least the 27 on the City E table, but or yeah. I mean, how much of that do we usually see in a non-COVID assistance related year? Is it really? And if we're not going to have that microtransaction or the microeconomic loan stuff, are we going to see? How many of those should we expect to be able to assist with the technical FTE and all that stuff? Because there's like a cutout, right, of CDBG, like 50,000 or something a year that automatically goes to economic development type work.
Yeah, set aside. Yep.
I mean, but I'm just curious. I mean, obviously it was a lot more than that, than the 50,000 because we had all that additional COVID assistance. How many businesses do we really help as far as that economic development stuff on a regular basis with just that usual 50,000 cutout?
So 4Cs, we usually, we've done several agreements with them, and they serve, I want to say like maybe 20.
I think they were at 27 this last year.
Micro enterprises in about a fiscal year span.
Okay.
When we were doing microloans, it was like 1 or 2 a year. It wasn't very many. If we don't spend that money within 2 years, that set aside, it gets rolled into our regular CDBG money, so it's not pooling up for very long.
Okay.
But I don't believe we've been spending the full $50,000 set aside in recent years.
Okay. I'm just curious.
Okay, are we ready to approve it then? Can we get a motion to approve?
I motion to approve with the scrivener's errors pointed out.
There you go,
Being
yeah.
fixed, but motion to approve with those issues being fixed.
Second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, it's passed. Next is aid to agencies, legacy aid to agencies, next step, Q&A session.
For this item, I guess we would draw your attention to the memo in the packet. So this will be a little bit different than we've done in previous years. We were able to meet with Marianne and Caleb and try to talk through how to handle the Q&A process. With so many agencies being involved, we were trying to decide how to manage that in a way that everyone's time is being used effectively. I think we're up to 21 or 22 legacy aid to agencies now. So what they landed on was trying this year to do a written Q&A process. So today at 5 o'clock, the applications were due through United Way. So likely tomorrow we'll be posting and sending out the legacy aid to agency submissions for you to read. And in the memo, there's a timeline of kind of what we're looking for. We were proposing 3 weeks for HCDC to review the submissions, and then we would ask if there are questions to submit written questions to staff by October 6th. So then staff will send those written questions to the agencies, and the agencies will respond in writing, and we'll get you that information. So then at the October meeting, which is October 20th, we'll have somewhat of a Q&A session where you're more discussing the Q&A than what we've done in the past. Then we've had agencies come up and we've asked them questions in person. This time we're proposing to do it in writing and just have the discussion at the October meeting. Does anyone have questions about that part so far?
So the agencies will still be here, but they don't have to make any formal presentation. I actually like that, and I think the agencies appreciate that too, so. And I think it's actually better for us to submit written questions because then they'll get responded to, because there've been a couple of times, not in the legacy aid to agencies, but a couple of times in the smaller processes where somebody hasn't been present, so I haven't been able to ask questions that I want to ask. So I think that sounds good.
Okay. I have a few other notes to mention, and then I have a question for you. We just wanted to throw out a few things just as we're entering this process. When we're asking questions for the submissions, we wanted to make sure that they're related to the submission and not anything out of left field. I don't think that'll be an issue, but I guess part of the reason for that is just hoping that the amount of questions is like a reasonable number. Since we're asking people to respond in writing, we didn't want to have too many questions. Just making sure that commissioners at this point aren't having private discussions with agencies so that everyone has the same information to consider during the funding process. And then just taking the time to review the applications thoroughly before asking questions. In my follow-up email tomorrow, I will send out a question, I guess. If you want the materials in writing printed out, I will make sure to get you the applications that way. If it's easier to read, I'm happy to do that. So our question for you is, let's say we're following this timeline. You send me your questions. We send the question to the agency. How do we want to handle it if the agencies do not respond in time, if they don't respond by the deadline that is given?
That's a good question. I think we need to bring them here and then ask them the question when they are here.
Invite them in.
Yes.
I guess I come from the old school of requesting funds. I don't understand why somebody wouldn't respond in time or show up for a question and answer period. I don't understand that.
Well, I kind of agree with you. I'd like to think that everybody's going to answer it, but we can't really, since it's not part of the official rules about funding, that the rules are you get your application in by 5 o'clock today, actually, right? Is today the cutoff? And you get to be considered for funds. There's not a caveat that says if you don't answer questions, you won't be considered. So, I think that's wherein the problem lies. I think that maybe we should have a little bit of like a grace period so that staff can review if all the questions have not been answered, to encourage to send another email out to those agencies and say, please answer these questions. It could affect our decision for funding. That would be what I would say.
That makes sense. A grace period and just being transparent about what happens if that passes.
It may not be an issue either, but we wanted to ask just to be prepared.
I hope it's not an issue. That I can't imagine an agency not asking or answering.
And I can keep you posted too at that point if we are having that
Problems
problem.
with the responses?
Yeah.
I guess I have like a process-oriented question.
Sure.
I understand that we're providing staff with questions for the different agencies based on their applications. What does that look like? Do each agency get all the questions asked by everybody, just kind of like 1 to 50 or whatever?
Hopefully not 50, but yeah.
I'm really expecting them to be clarification questions. It shouldn't be additional to all the information they've already provided on the application, but maybe something in the application is unclear and you don't understand what the information is saying. So,
Okay.
I think that's an important point. It should be pertinent to questions on the application. And that has, to be perfectly honest, has sprung up a few times in HEDC where we've been asked questions totally out of, left park, like your volunteer levels are going down. Well, sorry, that wasn't a question in the application, and it shouldn't be something that's considered for funding at the same time either. So I would hope that staff will review the questions, and if you think one is inappropriate, then you will have either a conversation or just not included in the questions that are sent to the agencies. So.
If there are duplicate questions too, we can weed those kind of things out to save everybody time.
Yep, I think so. So, what meeting? Can you give us just a overview on the timeline? I see this here in terms of when this commission, is it going to be October or November that we'll be reviewing the applications and making recommendations?
This process is a little bit longer than CDBG Home. So in general, tentative, it would be, you'll get this applications tomorrow, you'll start reviewing them. We'll do this Q&A process up until the October meeting. At the October meeting, you're really just talking about the questions and answers submitted. And then after that, ideally, you would start to score. We have 2 meetings to talk about funding recommendations. So if for some reason we get to the end of this question and answer session and you feel like I need more information, we could go back and ask agencies more questions, but we were thinking ideally maybe 2 meetings to talk about funding recommendations and scoring would be
So that's
ideal.
November and January?
Let me see. So you would score between October and November. Ideally, we would compile all the scores and everything for you to have at your November meeting to start those discussions.
And we don't have a meeting in December, is that right?
We don't, that's right.
So there is my concern. How many agents, I know we approved 3 new agencies. Have they been allowed, are they eligible for funding of this? So there's the problem. I think that we should have some idea of the month. I thought we were going to present a budget item to City Council for City Council to fund. Are we not doing that?
the budgeting process is the budget gets approved in March. We're like, staff are starting, like my budget is starting in November, October, November.
Okay, see, the reason I say that is because I know I always went to a budget workshop the first Saturday of January.
Right.
So there's still time, though, to make some recommendation for funding, correct?
Yeah, so I think the budget workshop is kind of like council's kickoff to
Okay.
working on the budget, but
Okay.
staff will be working on it this fall.
Okay, as long as we have time to, because I'm correct in my assumption, right? That we have new agencies. We're not going to slice the pie in more numbers, but actually we will probably request council to give us an increased amount of money to fund agencies, correct?
I mean, that's up to the commission. There's been discussion of that at previous meetings, but that would be.
Yeah. Well, I know when I voted to approve additional agencies, I said it was only with that understanding, is that we would get additional funding. Otherwise, I don't even think we ought to have a process for new agencies to come into late. It's just, the process isn't working if we aren't going to get additional money. I'm not going back down that rabbit hole where we're cutting agency funding because we have more agencies that need to be funded. So that's part of the wider discussion that I'm going to say it again, I'd like to see us have in terms of how the whole funding process is happening and does it need to be reviewed and revised. So, because it's just not working.
But I think the reality is we're gonna have 22 legacy agencies that we're gonna have to make decisions on whether we believe we're going to get that additional amount from council or not.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, when we had that discussion, I mean, I voted against bringing the in, and even at that point, I mean, the fact of the matter was they were approved, and there was never a guarantee that pot wasn't going to get split up more ways with smaller pieces for everybody, and that was a real concern at the time when, you know, previous members of this council or the commission were here. And I mean, am I wrong? I mean, we're going to make decisions based on what the existing amount is for people to request money. We can approve them for hire, but if we don't get approval from council for hire, then those funds aren't going to exist.
So what it'll force us into is making decisions about who's not going to get money and who's going to get cuts. And then what'll happen is the agencies will go to city council, and city council will make decisions one by one. This has happened over and over and over again. So, I mean, I really think that we have to make sure that council knows that we want a different process. And this is what I have been asking for since I've been on this for a year, is to take a look at this entire process. Because if we're not going to get additional money, let's not bother to even entertain any more agencies who might want to become legacy agencies. Why do it? And when doesn't a legacy agency's services become obsolete for funding? That's another question that I have. And the minimum funding that's given, is it necessary? Is it should that be reviewed also? The whole thing needs to be reviewed, and it's frustrating to me, really frustrating. So anyway, I don't have a problem with the timeline, but I do have a problem if we're going to expect to slice that pie into more pieces, the same size of funding into more pieces. I have a real problem with that. Okay. Any other questions on number 5, the legacy agency's next steps? Staff and commission updates.
Let's see, a couple of things here. You probably saw in your packet, council did approve the change to the bylaws, so that is official now. The next meeting will be October 20th. Like we said, that will be the Q&A review of the written responses. Normally, we would also do a unsuccessful and delayed projects checkpoint, but everybody's on track right now, so we shouldn't have an update for that. And just keeping an eye out for my emails, I guess, with the legacy process starting up. You'll be seeing those submissions available for review tomorrow because they were due at 5 o'clock today. So I'll try to get those to you as soon as I can. Any other updates? I think so. That's all.
And if they miss the 5 p.m. deadline, they're done.
Yeah,
I nervously checked and everyone was applying.
every
so it was
agency
fine.
knows that.
You got some from all 22?
I checked. I made sure everyone had an application started. So.
Okay.
Kyle, it would be very unusual. I didn't realize today was the cutoff, and made me glad I'm not working anymore. So.
It does feel good when you're like, oh, that's not my
Yeah.
problem anymore.
I did it all
It's
day.
nice.
So anyway, can I get a motion for adjournment?
All motion.
A second?
I will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes.